we do have legal remedies, don't we?
For sure, Madam Chair, but it is only
Assuming that this
now.
was true. I am not accusing anyone at this juncture, but certainly what we have heard is very substantial and very, very
Madam
serious.
Chair, thank you very much. If we knew what we know now, that this is a campaign,
Well, we do know what we know now.
this report by the Reuters, that there is actually
Kaya nga, ano magagawa?
maari po tayong gumawa po ng reply. That
Hindi, ang galing-galing natin gumawa ng note verbal. Hindi ba dapat mag-note verbal?
Opo. Note verbal is one way. That is the
Daan-daan na
diplomatic
ang
route.
ginagawa
But,
ng DFA, di ba? Hindi ba dapat i-protesta to?
Opo.
Hindi ba dapat mag-statement man lang yung DFA o DND? Hindi ba dapat magsalita ang pamahalaan natin na umalma? Bakit ito ginawa? Bakit biniktima ang libo-libong Pilipino?
Madam Chair,
Wala tayong palag eh.
if I
Hindi tayo umimik eh. Kining-kini tayo eh. Okay lang na pinatayan napakaraming Pilipino kung sakali tama ito. Narinig natin ng mga doktor galing sa Amerika, doktor ng DOH, mga sikat tanyag, mga expert sa kanilang larangan. Bakit hindi tayo nakikinig? The next issue is whether the U.S. military was behind these posts and tweets discrediting Chinese vaccines and other medical equipment. Unfortunately, we cannot compel a branch of the department, a co-equal state, to testify before the committee. Nonetheless, it's very clear in the Pentagon statement in response to the expose by Reuters, and you will have that, I think, already displayed on screen, please, the Pentagon statement. And I think the DFA personnel who are here present will stand by me that, in fact, persons well versed in interpreting statements of other states, such as the DFA, all here, as well as the government lawyers who are always responding to similar news. Do you agree that the observation of the news outlets that the above statement is not in any way a denial? It does not deny the material assertions of the Reuters expose. In fact, there are those who would say that this is tantamount to an admission from the U.S. Department of Defense. Is there anyone who would like to reply as to the nature of the Department of Defense's statement? On its face, as we read it, by the grounds of international law. So they do admit and they assert that they undertake a wide range of operations. Is that correct? Yes, I think that's clear. I mean, they assert that they use a variety of platforms, including social media, in order to counter malign influence against the United States. Certainly a right of every state to defend itself. Any thoughts? Yes, any lawyers from DFA or DND who are familiar with this sort of statement? It's certainly not a denial. Are we agreed?
It's neither confirmation, Madam Chair, nor a denial.
Yes, it's neither a confirmation or denial. However, we are also fully aware that if there are serious or unfounded allegations, for example, against the AFP, the DND will categorically deny the same. Isn't it so? Dito sa atin, kapag nagkaroon ng turuan na ganyan kalubha, ganyan kaseryoso, ganyan katindi, hindi ba talaga ay magpuunahan pa tayo para i-deny? Kasi nakakasira naman ang ating institusyon, hindi po ba? Yes, Secretary Manalo, please.
Thank you, Madam Senator. Just to on this particular statement, I think if we, judging and following from the final sentence, I think it's a declaration of perhaps a U.S. policy that they would be undertaking deterrence against any kind of malign influence against them.
Tama naman. Siyempre, pagtatanggol rin ang sarili nila.
You know, ibig sabihin.
Oo naman. Tayo rin, di ba? Ganun din naman. Pag inakusahan ng mali, siyempre, itatanggi naman natin, ano? So, is it a reasonable assumption that the U.S. military did not deny what was written in the Reuters article? Because the same is true? Is that what we assume, since there is no vehement denial typical of the military institutions worldwide? Yes, Secretary Manalo, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can only repeat what Secretary Teodoro said. I think it's neither a denial or an assertion.
Secretary Teodoro, you'd like to speak for yourself?
No, if it's neither a confirmation nor a denial, then the burden of proof is on the asserter to prove something. So that means to say that the US DOD will neither confirm nor deny. Somebody has evidence, come out and prove it. I think that's the import of the statement.
Yes, that's correct. Neither a confirmation or a denial. But why would you not deny something if it was not true?
I think, ma'am,
surely
so-
jump into the fray and knock them dead.
I really can't speak for them. I think that's long-term policy that they neither confirm nor deny several things.
I've read in the very recent past very vehement denials from the U.S. DND. They are certainly not hesitant about lambasting people who accuse them of what they believe are wrongful and inaccurate things.
As I said, ma'am, I can't really speak for them, Your Honor.
That's right. Neither can we, although of course some news outlets view the Pentagon statement not just merely a lack of denial, but an actual admission of the veracity of the Reuters, as it is the habit indeed of military institutions to deny immediately wrongful accusations. In our legal procedure, is it not that an assertion not denied is therefore deemed admitted?
It depends. If the assertion calls for a denial, the characterization that
This certainly calls for a denial because it has very, very serious ethical ramifications already mentioned by Dr. Lucy.
well, probably they can invoke matters of national security on that matter, but it's in a legal proceeding that when an assertion calls for a denial, then it can be laid down in evidence that the non-denial, if the nature of the question would fall in the normal course of things, if I remember my evidence right, and it is not denied, then it can be submitted in evidence that such was an implied admission
Yes,
in a legal proceeding.
I understand that a legal proceeding would be required, but it is, of course, even in a legal proceeding, even under the rules of Philippine evidence, clear that an assertion that is not denied will have to be deemed admitted. Certainly one such so important as this one. Any instinct from the AFP and the DND? Why was the U.S. DND so cagey with neither an admission nor a denial? Wouldn't you deny it immediately when someone accuses you of such an evil, wicked, dangerous, unethical campaign? Nakangiti kayo, kaya sasabihin ko na umuo na kayo. O
Yeah,
siya.
ma'am. In ours, because we belong to a different set of rules, we will deny naturally any
Yes.
assertion that will affect the integrity of the institution, any false assertion, any mal-propaganda, malign influence, will immediately deny it. But that's us.
Perhaps all military institutions will be more or less similar. In any
Ma'am,
case,
Philippine soldiers do not lie.
there we go.
Look, ma'am,
And all their wives will come forward to prove it.
yes, ma'am, I can assure
Thank
you
you.
about that,
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Okay, so we next call upon Professor Jonathan Ong, who's very kindly online, who authored the article, The Contagion of Stigmatization, Racism and Discrimination in the Infodemic Moment. During the pandemic, were you able to see these controversial tweets and posts in social media, which malign Chinese-made vaccines and protective equipment? Can you describe the posts and tweets that you mentioned? Dr. Ong, I see you.
Hi, Madam Chair. Thank you for having me. Yes, this was a subject of a joint paper that myself and Dr. Gideon Lasco had authored for several portals, including the LSE blog. So these posts, we could only assume were misinformation. So ang assumption po namin ay ito ay mga sabi-sabi lang or haka-haka lang ng mga tao online. We did not know that some of these posts were actually intentionally misleading. And I think that's what is so alarming about the Reuters investigation. They gave very specific examples of the posts and memes that contained hashtags that were directly aligned and directed by the US military. And ang strategy po dito ay to prey on existing anti-China sentiments. So preying on stereotypes that people might have about certain goods or items that are defective. So ito po ay ginagamit and wini-weaponize to stoke ang public's existing fears and anxieties at a time of incredible tragedy, and people were very afraid. So ito po ginamit, and that's what the Reuters investigation was asserting, to actually weaponize people's existing fears and anxieties. And this is very effective in getting people in a very fearful and panicked state. And once you're in that kind of state, you're more manipulable and prone to believing certain kinds of information. And that is why this needs further probing and investigation. And I think the Reuters report was very shocking, not only in giving very specific examples of these posts, but also telling us na nagkaroon ng conflict behind the scenes within the US military and the State Department between people who were justifying the campaign and people who were actually against the use of the campaign. And that's what we need to further investigate.
Thank you very much, Professor Ong. Magkapareho kayo ng DOH. Nakikita ninyo yung tweets and yung posts, pero hindi ninyo alam kung saan galing. Hindi rin ninyo alam kung may talagang nagmamaniobra na, kumbaga, centralized. Ano. But I would like to ask, what do you suspect is the objective of these posts?
So, so it's interesting that it's not just the Philippines that was the target country. It was several countries in Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and the Middle East. So these are regions in which the US has very clear geopolitical interests, and they want to consolidate support within these countries, while China is obviously trying to win over public sentiment here using vaccine diplomacy. And I think that's what the Reuters investigation was trying to uncover and go into great detail, di ba? Na parang tinatry i-counter
Dr. Ong, Professor Ong, sorry. Naniniwala kayo na may disinformation campaign that was managed and concerted by groups interested in the US policy in these very controversial regions?
So I will base it on the Reuters report, and if you allow me to explain a little further. So the Reuters report was very detailed in identifying people they had interviewed, US-based diplomats and also former military officials who were very critical of the campaign. And I think that's yung power ng story in the Reuters report is they based it off people's testimonies and anonymous testimonies saying that they had actually objected to employing this disinformation campaign in these countries na may military interests ang United States. And so they were able
Yes,
to
Professor, I'm also
the
fully
leadership
aware.
and the accounts.
Oh, sorry. Professor, yes, I know many American citizens as well as government officials who are horrified by the notion that such a campaign was undertaken by the Pentagon. So you feel somehow that this is real, even if you did not observe any systematic proliferation of disinformation.
So I did not have access to that level of data. To be able to access this kind of information, kailangan natin ng verification from social media platforms themselves. And I think that's what the Reuters reporters did. Once they identified the 300 accounts that were guilty of engineering that hashtag, they consulted Twitter, now called X, whether indeed their suspicions were correct, and they verified that. They actually verified that and took down those accounts. But if I may add, Madam Chair, I have additional questions about this kind of reporting. And if I may ask those questions for you to further probe through your office.
Yes, I'm happy to hear them now, or you can submit them confidentially if you don't want to reveal them at this point.
Yeah, I'm happy to share some of these questions now.
Yes, if you can do it very quickly, we have
Okay.
quite a long way to go.
Sige po. Unang-una, what is striking to me as a disinformation researcher who is very knowledgeable about the kinds of disinformation campaigns, how they are organized behind the scenes, and the quality and the tone in which they are expressed online. It's interesting na yung examples that they gave ng Reuters is translated in the local languages. So designed siya in Washington, D.C. by the U.S. military, but they are translated in Filipino. But they're also translated around into different countries and made to spread across the countries. We need to ask, therefore, are there possibility of subcontractors that the U.S. military enlisted? And who might those subcontractors be? And where are they located? It is interesting that those posts convey insider jokes, cultural knowledge of what would resonate with local citizens and communities in the Philippines, but also in other countries like Turkmenistan, I think, was one of the other examples. So it's important for us to track down potential in-country collaborators responsible for the translation and dissemination of the campaigns, for us to hold these people into account. Number two would be the activity of social media platforms themselves. If you read very closely the Reuters investigation, it was very interesting that Reuters reported how social media platforms called the US military for a meeting, for a Zoom meeting, to say that they were able to identify these accounts that the US military were using and operating from their base. But did these social media platforms, particularly Facebook, which was identified in the Reuters report, did they communicate this to the Philippines office of Facebook? Did they communicate this to any Philippines government official who they should also be held into account for? So these social media platforms are obviously, their headquarters are in the United States, but they must be
That's correct,
accountable to us as well. So I
Yes.
think those are two important
They haven't even
questions.
turned up this morning, Professor Ong.
Yeah, and I think those are important questions that an independent body of researchers should be able to get access to, and I think your office should feel empowered to commission an independent, deep investigation here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ong. That's very helpful, and those are certainly leads that we need to follow up on. Meanwhile, we go back to the DOH and Vince Dizon, and admitted by us all here. During the first 6 months, there was a very low vaccination rate until the very end of 2021, and the rate at that point was 25%, and we know that President Duterte was irate that he couldn't push it forward, threatening, in fact, imprisonment at one point for those who refused to be vaccinated. To your mind, what were the main reasons, even among very vulnerable sectors manifesting grave comorbidities? Do you manage, in hindsight, to explain why the low hesitancy, despite the fact that people were falling ill and many of us lost relatives in the pandemic? Yes, you're recognized, Vince.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I think just to put things in perspective, there were really two main and very serious challenges during the beginning of the vaccination program, which was sometime in the late part of 2020, leading towards 2021. The first one was really the lack of supply. It was very difficult to get supply of any vaccine.
So part of it was a supply issue.
It was a supply
Yes,
issue.
yes,
But
we're all aware of that.
coupled with that was really what Yusek Rosette mentioned, which was really very strong hesitancy issue on the part of the public. As the surveys at that time showed, it was as low as 25%, not to begin with, meaning only about 25 to 30% were actually willing to take a COVID vaccine. In order to address this, I think upon directions of the president himself at that time, there was really a very, very strong multi-sectoral effort, which included the government agencies as well as the private sector. In fact, I recall there was a very strong campaign to combat that. And this was really also borne out by a lot of
And we
disinformation.
continue to be grateful for the participation of the private sector, the SM Group, San Miguel
Yes.
Group, the Razon Group, who all bolted in and showed their civic-mindedness, offering for free so many vaccines. The LGUs were also at the forefront. My question is, during that period of great vaccine hesitancy and intermittent supply, during that more or less 6 month plus period, how many probably died or contracted severe COVID? Do you have any data at all?
Madam Chair, during that time, we started off with, during the second quarter of 2020, that would be,
Come again?
during the second quarter of the year 2020, when the COVID started, we had a total of 33,991 illnesses and 1,936 deaths. At the end of the year 2020, we had a total of 158,404 illnesses and 3,678 deaths.
Okay, this is still 2020.
Yes,
Paano yung
madam.
2021? Up to the second quarter, sabihin natin.
Yes, Madam Chair. During 2021, second quarter of 2021, we had a total of 646,760 illnesses and 12,689 deaths.
So it climbed radically.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Tapos, nung katapusan ng 2021, kung kailan talaga nagsimula yung marami na nagpapabakuna, ilan ang nagkasakit at ilan ang namatay?
During the fourth quarter of 2021, only for the fourth quarter, we had a total of two,
This is not cumulative.
not cumulative, Madam
Can
Chair.
we have cumulative?
Okay.
Perhaps it's not today, then you can submit it.
Yes, Madam Chair, we will provide
Sige,
that.
sa last quarter lang po.
Sa last quarter lang po ng 2021, we had a total of 298,452 illnesses and 7,878 deaths.
Yung third quarter, para maidagdag na lang natin lahat. Yung
Yes
third
po.
quarter po.
Third quarter of 2021, we had a total of 1,117,896 illnesses. Just wanted to emphasize, Madam Chair, that during this third quarter, we had the Delta variant.
Yep.
And then the deaths during that time, the third quarter of 2021, was at 21,424.
So, these are shocking numbers. The mortality and morbidity rates are terrible. And this is the period that we refer to and that the Reuters article refers to. Yes, Mr. Vince Dizon.
I just want to just very quickly just highlight that very important data point that Yusek had made. I think the 6-month period you're mentioning is really a period between the first quarter of 2020, around February, and towards the third quarter, 2021, sorry.
Kailan ba nag-umpisa yung bakuna?
2021 po, March 1.
Kaya nga, so yung first quarter hindi talaga kasali, second quarter lang
Opo, but I think the importance of the first quarter is that this was during the time when the outbreak of the Delta variant started in India, if I'm not mistaken, and it would eventually and inevitably lead
Parang yung
to.
Delta was much later in the year.
Hindi pa, ano po yan? Middle of 2021. Mga ganun po.
Third quarter.
Opo, mga ganun po. So I think the critical timeline that you mentioned it's made even more critical because of the Delta variant. Kasi yun po talaga yung, I think, considered the most deadly. That's why we needed to really vaccinate as many and as fast during this period. But unfortunately, because of hesitancy and as shown today, the disinformation that came in during that time, it made it doubly.
So you do think the information had its malign effect?
Oh, definitely.
And, truly worked against the Filipino people. The numbers are shocking. We're talking about millions, hundreds of thousands. This is no meager number. This is much worse than the body count and casualties of war.
Yes, ma'am. That's why I think the president really at that time really expressed a lot of frustration because he knew that it would lead to illnesses and sadly death.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dizon. Yusek, one last question. As a doctor, this is the last question. As a doctor po, is there any valid reason at all why people should be dissuaded from receiving Sinovac shots? I know it's a mere 50+% efficacy, but it's at that time was better than nothing, right?
Madam Chair, first, based on studies, Sinovac prevented 51% of symptoms if you are to receive that, but 100% protection from death and from severe disease of COVID-19. And as a doctor, based on the evidence at hand, wherein the Food and Drug Administration of the Philippines has given its emergency use authority based on safety and efficacy, and also the WHO emergency use listing, Sinovac was included, and based on our experts' recommendations, I will not have that kind of issues regarding this vaccine and will not dissuade people to receive the vaccine.
Thank you very much, Yusek. So we have that on record that there's really no medical reason to object to Sinovac or even the other Chinese vaccine. Kaya lang, kailan ba dumating yung iba, yung iba't ibang Western vaccines, ika nga?
Yes, Madam Chair. During the first quarter also of 2021, after the donation from the Chinese government of Sinovac in the last week of February 2021, AstraZeneca vaccines came, and these were donations coming from the COVAX facility. A total of around 500,000 came.
So that was first quarter of 2021?
Yes, that was first week of March of 2021 where AstraZeneca came. And then the other Western vaccines came around May already, Madam Chair, but only in trickles.
Thank you very much, Yusek. Thank you very much, DOH. Punta muna tayo sa DFA. Having heard the doctors as well as the other specialists, can we ask from the DFA once again that if indeed the U.S. military orchestrated an anti-vax misinformation campaign in the Philippines, did they violate local or international law? Does this action contravene the principle of non-intervention in the International Court of Justice? And even, as some scholars and the New Zealand experts say, that this information, which affects public health efforts during a pandemic, is a possible violation of international law with grave consequences. Yes, Secretary Manalo or anyone from the DFA, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On that particular question, I don't think I can really give an answer on whether it did violate international law. I suppose.
Well, if we assume that what was written is in fact accurate, can we say that this violates local or international law, or are we going to say that this is par for the course and accept that this information that causes hundreds of thousands of deaths is acceptable international norm?
Well, Madam Chair, I think we would have to really investigate.
No, just as a matter of law, if this was in fact true, I'm not trying to catch you. If this was in fact true that this information campaign of this magnitude, of this variety was undertaken, wouldn't it violate local and international law? Well, Dr. Lucy already said that this was clearly unethical if it were true.
Perhaps, Madam Chair, I could pass the floor to our legal advisor because I think this is more of an international legal issue. I have our Assistant Secretary for International
Yes, po. Secretary,
Secretary.
Yes, po.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. Locally, it could any disinformation
Yes,
campaign,
can we speak closer to the mic, please?
locally, any international, any campaign to discredit,
Oo.
especially an information that concerns health issue is a matter of national security, of course. Therefore, any country could take issue on this. But
I'm sorry, national security. We're talking about public health.
yes, it is a national security issue.
Yes, I understand, but graver than that, of course, it causes so many, there's widespread death and disease, right?
Indeed, Madam Chair. Therefore, any attempt to discredit or to sow disinformation in, for example, in the Philippines,
Sure.
our national authorities are for sure can take issue on that and can take action.
What action, what legal recourse would we have in the international arena?
You could go either to counter the disinformation as what the health department
No,
said.
but that's not an international arena. What legal recourse does the Philippines have? Has the Philippines have? Anong magagawa natin? Kasi, nangyari na nga to. Paano natin gagawa ng paraan na hindi na mauulit?
Opo. If we are able to identify po kung sino po yung nagkakalat ng maling information, we could go
Yes,
the
but what's the
diplomatic
legal
way.
recourse? What are our remedies? Saan tayo pupunta?
Well, Madam Chair,
Ang hirap naman na sasabihin sa mga pamilya na nawalan ng mga mahal sa buhay, na wala na tayong magawa, iyakan na lang natin.
hindi naman po ganun, Madam Chair.
Eh, kaya nga,
I think
ano po ang sinasabi mo?
we should vigorously inform the public about any disinformation that is being made.
Hindi, pero
by
wala
any
ba tayong
entity.
legal recourse dyan? Wala bang mapapataw na kaso ang Pilipinas na hindi naman tama ang ginawa nila?
This needs further study, Madam Chair. Of course, using
We do have legal remedies, don't we?
for sure, Madam Chair, but it is only
Assuming that this
now.
was true. I am not accusing anyone at this juncture, but certainly what we have heard is very substantial and very, very
Madam
serious.
Chair, thank you very much. If we knew what we know now, that this is a campaign,
Well, we do know what we know now.
this report by the Reuters, that there is actually
Kaya nga, ano magagawa?
maari po tayong gumawa po ng reply. That
Hindi, ang galing-galing natin gumawa ng note verbal. Hindi ba dapat mag-note verbal?
Opo. Note verbal is one way. That is the
Daan-daan na
diplomatic
ang
route.
ginagawa ng
But,
DFA, di ba? Hindi ba dapat i-protesta to?
Opo.
Hindi ba dapat mag-statement man lang yung DFA o DND? Hindi ba dapat magsalita ang pamahalaan natin na umalma? Bakit ito ginawa? Bakit biniktima ang libo-libong Pilipino?
Madam Chair,
Wala tayong palag eh.
If I
Hindi tayo umimik eh. Kining-kini tayo eh. Okay lang na pinatayan napakaraming Pilipino kung sakali tama ito. Narinig natin ng mga doktor galing sa Amerika, doktor ng DOH, mga sikat tanyag, mga expert sa kanilang larangan. Bakit hindi tayo nakikinig?
Madam Chair, I believe that our country has also made representations sa ating mga
Wala pa akong narinig atin po yung representation. Mahingi ng kopya, please.
And we could also go.
Yes, is that correct,
But-
Secretary Manalo? ASEC Tejada asserts that we have made representation,
Madam
whatever
Chair.
that means, in protest to these actions. Napakarami nating note verbal. Hindi ba dapat isulat man lang na hindi tama itong mga pangyayaring to?
Well, Madam Chair, the first time the DFA became aware of the situation was when the Reuters article came
Oh,
out.
sabay-sabay naman tayo. Pero mula noon, what has been done? I believe it's June 12, June 14, ano? Nasa 25 na po tayo. Have you taken any action? Considered perhaps drafting something? Somehow taking the cudgels for all those who died?
We have, in fact, when we heard of this article, we immediately thought of seeking information from the United States. Kasi doon na namin nalaman to after we
So,
got there.
have we received any response?
But I asked our Assistant Secretary,
Yes,
American
please.
Affairs, because we did want to seek clarification on what exactly was this issue that we read about.
Please.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair, and Senator Padilla. Yes, as the Secretary said, Madam Chair, immediately after the Reuters article came out, obviously we couldn't, do any official action yet on the basis of an article. So in response to your question about the note verbal,
But
but
the
definitely
simple
we
query-
reached out. Yes, we reached out immediately to the U.S. Embassy and
In
to
what form?
U.S. authorities through our regular consultations
Okay.
mechanism.
Has there been any
The-
reply forthcoming?
The initial response po was we were referred to the Department of Defense, and so we also got a copy of the statement that you had read into the
Yes,
record
there's a
this
defense
morning.
attaché, we all know him. Anong sagot?
Essentially, they are looking into the matter, and we have not received any official and formal response yet in terms of any confirmation, denial, or anything. So we are waiting on that. We continue to monitor and to ask for information.
Yes, but moving forward, we are all in agreement that some action needs to be taken. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair. In fact, we have initiated the
So we're counting
regular-
on both the DFA and now the DND, as mentioned by Ate Chan Gonzaga, to help us get to the bottom of this, and if we have legal remedies, undertake them as
Yes,
quickly as
ma'am.
possible.
Basically, the DFA and our embassy in Washington, not the Department of National Defense here.
Yes,
in
Secretary
the
Teodoro.
It's the US DOD that Asik Chan Gonzaga was referring to, not the Department of National Defense of the Philippines. That's why.
I thought he was referring to you, given that you are the
No,
counterpart.
no, Your Honor. He was referring to, that's a diplomatic matter, even though involving a
Even though it
counterpart.
involves the counterpart
Yes,
department.
and that's
You're
more
certain of
proper.
that?
Yes, Your Honor, I'm very certain. That's more properly within the purview of our diplomatic representation to the United States
Yes,
and the DFA.
Probably, but if you could help us along, because we would like to get to the bottom of this, certainly your
If the
counterparts would have
DFA
better
requests us, Your Honor,
information.
we will certainly.
DFA, please find it in your heart to request the Department of Defense. I don't know why we've suddenly become so officious, but let's do that. Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we will, of course, first wait for the reply from the DOD, the U.S. Department of Defense, and obviously if there's anything in their reply which would prompt us to seek the assistance of our
Hindi, magtulungan naman tayo. Ang dami-daming nagkasakit ng malala, ang dami-daming Pilipino na namatay dahil dito. Hindi natin alam kung direktang ito, pero sa numero na lang makikita natin na talagang nakakasindak ang epekto nito. Kaya't siguro naman, all hands on deck naman tayo nito. Importante naman na matapos itong usapin ito, no? At kung kinakailangan, alamin natin kung may sala talaga at patawan ng karampatan parusa. Eto ngayon, which brings us, since DND got back into the fray, let us move on to a related matter, which was a report last year that the United States finally decided to release vaccines which the Philippines already paid for, only after President Duterte rescinded his decision to abrogate the VFA. So we're back to DND territory. Ambassador Romualdez, I believe you've been waiting, but you're muted. Dave?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Romualdez. You were quoted as saying, then President Duterte, we need to give this VFA a chance because it will help us get our vaccines to our people. Does this mean that what ensued was a quid pro quo arrangement between the US and the Philippines? May kaliwaan bang nangyaring ganito? The vaccine, nabayad na natin, would only be delivered if the VFA remained untouched. It's a quote from your interview.
No, what I meant there was what we had paid for was the Moderna, but the United States at that time was prepared to donate several vaccines or a number of vaccines to the Philippines and to other countries as well. But obviously, the priorities were the allies. We were an ally, but let's be very honest about it. The fact that there's no such thing as a free lunch, and the VFA was being dangled as by then President Duterte, that he was not sure he wanted to continue with it. He abrogated it at that time. So I pleaded with the president and told him that perhaps it would be best if we could just allow the VFA to continue, so that it would be much easier for us to be able to get the United States to give us the vaccines that we paid for, at the same time also get more vaccines down the road.
Yes, do you know a certain Haydarian? I think he was the one who interviewed you, and he said that you said, except Washington was holding back all their vaccines because President Biden back then wanted all Americans to get it first. But we had already paid for our Moderna vaccines. And to put it frankly, I basically begged the White House to give us the vaccines, to give people hope.
Well, like I said, there was already a executive order from the White House that President Biden said that Americans will first get the vaccines before we start getting the vaccines out.
But why was there a need for the good ambassador to beg the White House for the delivery of Moderna vaccine when we'd already paid for them?
But even if we had paid for them, the schedule was actually still much later on. What I did was to ask the White House if they could give us the vaccines earlier than that.
Did they come earlier? In fact, as I recall, they were quite seriously delayed.
It was a delay, but there was other vaccines that are actually given priority for the Philippines, and specifically that was Pfizer.
So why was Pfizer, which we did not pay for, in the Philippines before Moderna, which we had paid for? I'm
Well,
lost.
Yeah, Pfizer had more
supply.
vaccine, more supply, and they had it with the COVAX facility, which I'm sure our DOH is familiar with. That we were given, the donation came from the.
And what
from
did the
COVAX.
VFA, what did the mention of the VFA have to do with it?
Well, like I said, in diplomacy, as far as I'm concerned, I felt that if we had the BFA in place, which was in place at that time, we just had to continue with it. So it'll be much easier for us to be able to really ask our friends here in the United States. It will be much, perhaps more conducive for them to be able to give us the vaccines.
Is it correct then, Ambassador Romualdez, to say that aside from paying the purchase price, the Philippines also had to beg and promise to allow U.S. troops in the country before U.S. vaccines were released? This is the impression that your interview gives.
Well, what was meant there was the vaccines that were being donated is what we were after. The vaccines that we had paid for, Moderna had already made it clear that the vaccines will be coming at a certain time frame. And it was, well, as you said, it was delayed.
So, what connection did the VFA and the Moderna vaccines have, in your mind?
Well, there was no connection in that one. The connection was more on the donation, on having more of the vaccines available for us. And specifically, that was Pfizer.
So you're saying that the VFA was related to the donation of Pfizer and had nothing to do with the already paid supply of Moderna?
No, it did not have anything to do with that one. It was more on the donations that were made available to countries all over the
But
world.
we paid for the Moderna. It's not a donation. Why did we have to
Yes.
agree to the VFA if we had already paid for the medicine?
We did not agree to the VFA because of Moderna. We allowed the president had approved the VFA to continue because I told him that perhaps it would be much easier for us to get more of the Pfizer vaccines that were part of the COVAX
I see.
facility.
I see. Did anything or anyone in Washington imply that the VFA had something to do with the provision of U.S.-made vaccines to the Philippines? Where did you get the notion that they were perhaps tied together and that they would be friendlier and more ready to provide Western vaccines if the VFA remained in place?
Well, I could see that the priorities were given to countries that have obviously good relations with the United States. I mean, it's a very simple deduction, really, when you see that there are other countries that were given priority. And I wanted to be part of that priority at that time.
Yes, but you already said that Pfizer, being so widely available and being supplied much more efficiently, was all over the world. Are you saying that all over the world, every country with Pfizer was also required to host U.S. soldiers?
No. This was the earlier part when we were asking for the Pfizer, because at that time there was limited numbers, as you specifically said. President Biden said that priority would be first for Americans to receive the vaccines before they start exporting it. However, they also had donations that were being given. The United States government was donating vaccines to the USAID and other facilities, and also to the COVAX facility. And I wanted to be part of that priority.
And the priority involved countries that hosted U.S. forces?
Not necessarily. I was just simply using that as a way of telling them that, look, we're going to continue with this. I hope that you'll give us, since we have and since 1951, we've had a mutual defense treaty. We've had the visiting forces agreement, which I'm sure President Duterte will perhaps continue with it. So these are the things that I used as a reason why we should be given priority like other countries close to the United States.
So it was just a usual inducement, is that what you're saying?
Well, perhaps.
Okay, thank you very much, Ambassador Romualdez, and of course to those in the United States online, most of all Dr. Lucy, as well as Professor Ong. Ambassador Romualdez, thank you very much. We're very grateful for your participation and your help in getting to the bottom of this report, and you are excused. Thank you very much. At this point, may I ask Mr. Attorney Talamayan of CICC regarding the Chinese cyber psyops here in the Philippines? Parang pinaglalaroan tayo ng lahat ng bansa. Up to this point, we are merely talking about American psyops. It is equally noteworthy, however, that the other player in the great power competition, China, has also been orchestrating or alleged to have been orchestrating illegal cyber operations in disinformation campaign, and that cyber attacks and hacking have been reported since January by DICT, clearly tracing the IP addresses to China. So DICT, Cybercrime Unit, would you like to comment on these reported hacking and attack incidents? I believe it's Attorney Talamayan po.
Good morning, Mr.
I see also that Attorney Lotok of NBI, are you with Cybercrime? Are you with the Cybercrime Division? Maybe you'd like to add something after Attorney Talamayan. Oh, great. So, Attorney Talamayan, please.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, yes, Chairman. Regarding the part of the CICC in monitoring the smear campaign by the Chinese government, Your Honor, we have been doing some analysis, and until now, Your Honor, because some of the IP address that has been mentioned in previous report of the CICC is located somewhere in China, and we cannot discount that this is just it was the Chinese government did it. At the moment, Your Honor,
So any other proof or evidence, or are there any other signs that these attacks were in fact state-sponsored? Or at least state-sanctioned by the People's Republic?
we cannot say that, Your Honor, because the using VPN, Your Honor,
Sorry.
a virtual network.
Yes.
It goes to some countries, and some of the research by the ICC owner. There are some countries that this smear campaign that was posted online is located somewhere in China. Some is in other countries, Your Honor, because they're using VPN, so we cannot locate it, Your Honor.
Right, but aside from the IP addresses, any other trademarks, any other hallmarks of Chinese origin?
Your Honor,
Kasi nga iniikot-ikot. Pero maliban doon, wala nang ibang indikasyon?
there's no big indication, Your Honor, that the Chinese government is doing it, Your Honor.
Oh, okay, because that's the impression that your report, or at least the report of the cyber agencies released in February. Parang ganun ang sinasabi.
Yes, Your Honor. The record that was released in February, Your Honor, it all goes to the Chinese government, Your Honor. That the Chinese has to do with it, all the campaign that going online, Your Honor. But until now, Your Honor, we cannot appeal. The ICC is still doing the deep research because of the tools that we have, Your Honor, is not that high tech that we can pinpoint all throughout to the Chinese government, Your Honor. Only the analysis, Your Honor.
Okay, so after the February attack with the IP addresses suspiciously deriving from China, meron na naman kayong report noong 27 April, hindi ko alam kung DICT o galing sa CICC o galing sa NBI, na nagsabi, recent massive spike in cyber misinformation against the Philippines from a website called Dark Reading. May alam po kayo tungkol dito? Kasi lumabas to sa dyaryo. Yes, please. DICT Director Reyes po. Kayo yung nag-release nito, yung tungkol sa dark reading?
Hindi po, though we have also monitored some spikes relative to that one. So similarly, we're working with the Cybercrime Investigation Coordination Center. So we trace most of the IP addresses that emanates from China as well.
Okay, is it true that cyber espionage activities in the Philippines have increased fourfold in the first quarter of 2024?
Actually, no, we could not classify it if it's espionage. We're trying to look into breaches and incidents. And
yes, but at least in terms of the hacking, in terms of the attacks on government sites, is it true that there's been a fourfold increase in said activity? In many cases, using IP address that come from China or having other proof that they derive from that country.
Yes, ma'am. For having it classified with as espionage, we have been reporting the incidents on a monthly basis through the National Cyber
Pero
Intelligence
tama na
Committee.
talagang times 4 na yung dagdag? Ganun ba kadami?
Yes, ma'am. Meron pong ganung spike.
Ganun talaga kadami?
Yes, ma'am.
Pero kung sinasabi niyong spike, ibig sabihin, babagsak ulit, tapos tataas ulit?
Yes, ma'am. There were instances, ma'am, when we have some incidents with the West Philippines, medyo may spikes. After that one,
At tuwing may incidente sa West Philippines,
meron pong ganung trend.
Yes, ang sabi, last year, this is going back a little bit, even if it's not cyber espionage, may sinasabi na yung Chinese hackers launched malware attacks on critical infrastructure bases in Guam. Is there any possibility or suspicion of that happening in the Philippines, given the rising tensions in the West Philippine Sea? This is an attack on the infrastructure bases in Guam, yung malware na narinig natin.
We have been monitoring some malwares, ma'am,
Yes, that's
specifically
right.
with our
That's why
government
I'm
agencies.
asking, is there any malware attack against our critical infrastructure?
We
Similar
have-
to Guam?
We have experienced, ma'am, so many. In fact,
So many.
we have been experiencing many, ma'am, malware attacks, although we have been preventing it. The reason for that, ma'am, we have already a connection with our government agencies. We have a National Security Operations Center, where 28 government agencies are connected to us, and we have been monitoring them 24/7, ma'am.
So
we
what's
have
being done to secure the country's critical infrastructure from malware and other digital attacks?
Yes, ma'am. We are recommending most, if not all, government agencies to connect to our National Security Operations Center to be monitored 24/7. If we have monitored such, we'll be informing them on such and we'll be investigating.
So are the key agencies, for example, CAAP and so on, our airports, our seaports, are they all part and parcel of your national security
The
operation?
AAP, ma'am, I think is already connected to our National Security Operations Center.
PPA?
We'll give you, ma'am, the listings. We have 28 of them, ma'am, later.
Have they actually caught any Chinese or other hacker group in the past 12 months or so? Na nahuhuli ba tayo? Kasi mayat-maya may report tungkol dito. Eh baka wala naman nahuhuli kahit kailan. Nakakaya naman tayo.
Yes, ma'am. The prosecution investigation, we pass it to the CICC, the National Bureau of Investigation, PNP, ma'am.
Ang galing mo magpasa, Director Reyes. Attorney Talamay.
Actually, no, it's not
CICC,
for bail.
meron ba kayong nahuhuli? O di kaya nahahabla?
Your Honor,
nahuhulong?
the CICC don't have any power regarding the law enforcement, Your Honor.
Chair, may I? The latest PAOK operations that resulted in the takeover of illegal cyber hubs in Bambantarlac and in Porac, Pampanga have resulted in a treasure trove of figurative treasure trove of a lot of capabilities which are under the process of analysis.
So this has to do with cybersecurity or simply with POGO?
We are not assuming that. Actually, ma'am, we hesitate to classify this as a POGO because this is not a POGO. They were involved in human trafficking.
But isn't that the very nature of POGO? That
No, ma'am,
criminal syndicates undertake international crime?
Actually, ma'am, I'd like to differentiate, if I can take the opportunity. POGOs are business process outsourcing that do not take bets anyway. But I think what happened was during the ban on gambling in China, they transferred operations
There's
here.
always been a ban in China.
Right. And when Macau was closed, they transferred here and all sorts of things happened. Suffice it to state, ma'am, that I think
Ano pinagkaiba sa POGO?
No, POGO is a pure business process outsourcing. For
Okay.
example, ma'am, off-track betting.
Anong suspicion ninyo dun sa Pampanga Tapora?
Ay, hindi po, love scam na ho, scamming na eh.
Pero yung love scam, usong-uso yan sa NBI, no? Pa yung sinabi Lorenzo, parati doon na-report yan.
No, love scam and other forms of illegal activities. And I really don't know if bet taking or gaming was in.
So hindi na siya POGO, kasi
Hindi
hindi
naman.
na siya bet taking.
Hindi naman. And the equipment gathered is still in the process of being.
So it's a cybercrime hub?
Yes, ma'am.
Kung ano-anong scam?
Definitely a
So
cybercrime hub.
There are no actual gambling machines, is that what you're saying?
No, ma'am, it's all electronic. And black
No,
text
but most
blast
gambling
machines.
setups now are electronic.
I'm not too sure, ma'am. I'm not too sure about that. It's with the PAOK now. But I think I have information that all agencies are cooperating and analyzing this to see what kind of activities these people were involved in.
So yung nahuhuli natin, hindi pa natin nahuhuli sa cyber talaga, nahuhuli talaga sa physical
Sa law enforcement operations,
and law
ma'am.
enforcement operations.
Yung cyber, ma'am,
Yung
is
sa cyber,
more
wala pa tayo
preventative.
nahuhuli, so di namin daming report.
Preventative, ma'am. At least walang breach, walang DNS, walang denial of service na nangyayari. I mean, in that sense, parang bangko po, hindi nasasara yung ATM. Bagamat may reported na mga breaches, na ipapara naman.
Kasi
Hindi po talaga titigil yun, ma'am. Hindi
Pero
titigil.
nababawasan kapag take-down ka ng take-down.
Depende po sa sitwasyon. Katulad din naman po ng mga kumpanya, hindi po tumitigil talaga. Lumalaki lang ng lumalaki. Kasi po, pagkakakitaan nga, pwede pong ransomware. Kahit
Pero
po
yung
yung...
tanong, Lumalaki ng lumalaki. Tayo ba? Lumalakas ng lumalakas ang kapabilidad na labanan.
Well, lumalakas po ang hindi lang po labanan, kung hindi po protektahan muna. Sa IT po natin, pinoprotektahan po natin ang information systems natin sa mga breach. Doon naman po sa remediation sa cyber, iba naman po sa DND, ibang usapan po yun, ay iba naman po ang role, no? Pero the important thing is
I think there's a crossover because of the great fear of cyber terrorism.
Yes,
with the
ma'am.
malware attacking critical infrastructure. I think that's actually the great concern
Yes,
in
ma'am.
this committee.
Agreed. So, ma'am, there are two approaches here. I think that the ICT will agree. Number one is there's a great campaign to improve our cyber hygiene, which is the weakest link of any any information technology system. For example, like a credit card scam. If you answer a phishing email, you're done for, no matter how robust your infrastructure is. The weakest link is the user.
Correct.
So cyber hygiene, and secondly, is the resilience and redundancy of the systems. But there is a coordination mechanism, but in certain systems, we need to have some siloing.
So, ang totoo, we have a long way to go.
Because it costs a lot of money, actually.
That's correct. It's all engineering.
Yes, ma'am. And cash.
Thank you. I think we've now completed the hearing, at least for this disinformation of the Pentagon. I will call for a 5-minute suspension. I think we've more or less covered all the issues. I call for a 5-minute suspension, and perhaps we can release the DOH at this juncture. Thank you very kindly for your active participation and the valuable information you've shared from the medical profession as well as from the area of public health. I will call for a 5-minute suspension, therefore, but the rest need to stay for the next item on the agenda, and this has to do with the Ayungin Shoal incident of June. So 5 minutes po, and we'll see each other shortly.